So I'm with Corey Benson, my insurance agent, and he's one of the top producers and farmers, and he's a great person. I really like him. I trust him. I know he would help anybody that I ever sent to him. So I really want to talk about homeowners insurance and whether or not we should have earthquake insurance and what covers what. So Corey, do you want to take the first part? You know, we have to have some homeowners
Sure.
insurance.
So something that always comes up is that we as a society always have to have a homeowner's policy because we have a loan on it, and the same thing with cars. So when we have auto and home, those are typically required. Earthquake insurance is always excluded from our normal homeowner policies, and I think one of the most important things for my role is to educate people on risk tolerance or things that are out there that they might or should entertain looking at. And there's ways that you can endorse your homeowner's policy typically to add earthquake as an endorsement, and then on that caveat there's also ways to have standalone policies for that. So I guess we could just kind of start with that.
Okay, so I know that we get discounts if we bundle our homeowners in our auto, and if you have life or other insurances, bundling them, you typically get a discount. So once you do that, we probably need earthquake insurance because we have this. We're in the Cascadia subduction zone. That earthquake is overdue, and so I mean, one of the questions I asked you when you and I were talking about it is, hey, should I have earthquake insurance?
Yeah, and I always, a lot of insurance products, good examples like life insurance. Something's always better than nothing at all. So earthquake in our area, especially if you hear the risk of we're overdue, something's always better than nothing. So the due diligence of yourself and taking, nobody cares more about something that's yours than you. So your insurance agent will provide you details if you ask. If you're inquiring and you want to know more, your insurance agent should be able to help you with that. So some sort of an endorsement on your homeowner's policy is better than nothing at all, but then also entertain the thought of doing a standalone policy. Look into the pros and cons of those and the differences between the two of them. Just from my standpoint, for my own policies, I've added it as a standalone policy, and it's not to knock around the endorsement, but I just wanted broader coverage, and the standalone policy tends to offer more broad coverage for like separate structures and personal property and those kinds of things. The endorsement on a homeowner's policy isn't as robust as you would think it would be. So you kind of have to do your due diligence and ask those questions because not all policies are created equal. So that's an important thing to look into and ask your agent.
And so originally you said that the homeowners probably excludes the earthquake. So we definitely need to look at what our policies include and exclude. And then we need to look at what we have and do we want to cover it. So what does an earthquake insurance policy cover, and what are the deductibles on those?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So typically within every single policy, they have definitions and what they include and exclude. It's usually one or the other. But they really kind of go down through the nitty gritty of how they actually work, even on a claims side, like, what to do if something happens, that kind of thing. Your typical earthquake policy does not work exactly like a homeowner's policy. Your deductible isn't, a $500 deductible or $1,000 or 1% of whatever. Your basic default options are a percentage. It's and depending on the company that you have, they kind of set the criteria of what they'll allow you to purchase. So if you do want, let's say a 5% deductible or a 10% deductible, that percentage means how much. It's a percentage of whatever the dwelling coverage is in its entirety, or the overall coverage in its entirety. So some policies offer like a blanket number for everything that you have, meaning your dwelling, your separate structures, and your personal property, and loss of use, and that kind of stuff. So you get one big fat number, and then let's say you got 10% of that huge number is your deductible, meaning not that you have to pay it, but you wouldn't file a claim for anything under that. So it would have to be significantly over that to kind of justify the claim. So that's something else to think about. What is how does the deductible work, and what is that equal to, and what does that look like in the event of a claim? And just try to put yourself with that forward thinking mind of, if something bad were to happen, do I have to get through $40,000 worth of damage before I can even initiate a claim? And so that's something to factor in. So yeah, I think that's a very important question.
Well, I know when I was in Seattle during the 6.8 earthquake that they had, I had a friend that had a brick house, and her entire chimney was destroyed, and it kind of came off her house during that earthquake, and she didn't have any earthquake insurance, so none of it was covered.
Right.
You know, if she'd had earthquake insurance, the rest of the house was still all brick and it was okay, except for the chimney, kind of separated from the house.
Right.
I don't know that she would have been covered even on that.
Just based on the amount of damage.
Yeah,
And how much it would have
it was like
Yep.
$12,000 to rebuild the
Right.
chimney, and so it wasn't worth filing a claim for it.
Right.
But let's say something else had happened. Let's say the house blew up because the gas lines ruptured. Then would fire insurance cover that?
So yeah, that is a great question, because definitions within the policy, and I said that all insurance policies are just not created equal, and the same thing with claims. So every claim is completely different than the other. So when you're dealing with earthquakes that cause damages to homes, there are other things. I mean, the loss of power, water damage, fire damage, and typically they try to figure out how did the stuff get there and how is that covered. So if your house actually caught fire and burned down, and your policy specifically says that fire is the cause of, is a covered peril, that's something to truly consider. And I'm pretty sure most insurance companies would take that into consideration. However, I also go back to that statement of not all claims are the same, they're not equal. And every single one of them requires an investigation and a claims adjuster to actually do their part and do their job. And with the appetite of all insurance companies at an all-time high, they will scrutinize the claims. So, and that's where it's important to, I think, just disclose to the overall population out there is, do your due diligence, count on yourself to take care of yourself with the tools that are out there. Ask the questions, dig deep, and there's a reason why some of these policies are 60 to 120 pages long. They tell you exactly how they don't work. So I think that's also important.
Yeah, it also makes it hard for the layperson to weed through it. But let's say, we're in, what gap would we need to watch out for in most of the policies that you've read?
I would actually throw it out there to be more familiar with any potential gaps. Usually, you just have to get familiar with what you have and what's available. Asking questions on precisely the difference between endorsements and actually standalone policies. Reading through your actual policy. If you don't have a copy of your policy, and I know renewals are different from policies, because at new business, when you actually buy a policy, you get a copy of your policy, but on renewal, it's a simplified form. They don't send you the 60 to 120 pages of how your policy works. I would actually recommend that even if you could get a policy backer, and that's kind of like a sample policy of your policy, or just order an electronic copy of your policy from your agent. No matter how old it is, that should be something that should be available to you. And what I've always recommended to people is just hit Control F on a PDF, type in the words and just start jumping around a little bit for how does this stuff work, how or doesn't work, what's excluded, kind of a thing. I think it's very smart to kind of take matters into your own hand and educate yourself a little bit. Once you know some of the basics or a little bit, you'll see yourself asking the right questions. Some of the policies, the way they work, it's like saying, this is exactly how your policy doesn't work for you. And I think it's helpful to understand exactly what they don't do, because everything else they do. And then there's policies that are flipped, they're completely the opposite direction. So I think if you as a consumer, as somebody that was worried about how your policy works, that's the first step, I think, as far as being prepared with your own arsenal. Your insurance agent isn't a mind reader. They're not going to know what your concerns are unless you actually voice them. If you're concerned about it, definitely set up time to review those policies and ask those questions.
Well, I know when we've done our review in the past, you've asked us, what all's changed in our household and what valuations do we have, because we have some antiques and some jewelry and things like that. So we've always had to go in and get those updated, and we haven't done it for a while, so we probably should do that again. But also, it's important to take a video of everything you have, because you don't remember everything you have. Open up your cupboards and shoot the video or shoot a picture so you have that and access to that in the event you do have a claim.
Yeah, and even in a panic, I think we can, thinking back 3 years ago, we had those wildfires that went through, and myself included, I quickly ran through the house, slowly just recording around the room so that I could recall what was there if something should happen to the home before we jumped out of there and left for a little bit. But if you do that ahead of time, this is something that you can keep on the cloud in your phone, that kind of stuff. In your computer, you could give it to your agent to keep in file. That's the kind of stuff that's better than absolutely nothing. The hardest part about trying to file a claim for personal property is trying to remember what you had when it's gone. So if someone steals it, or if your whole house is just wiped out and it's a burning hole in the ground, try to recall everything that you had in that house when there's a burning hole in the ground is nearly impossible. And we do have a process, and the process is uncomfortable, but at least you have a process. Yeah. It's better than nothing at all, but yeah.
Yeah, I know we have people that are just getting back into homes after those fires. A couple friends of mine just posted that they just finished their house and then finally have their occupancy permits, and they're beautiful, but they still lost absolutely everything they had.
And all that time, they lost a lot of time. Yep.
Well, it's been 3 years. So it's real important that we make sure that we do that. And Corey, I want to thank you for your time. And you guys, if you ever need somebody that really can explain a policy and what you have, he's a great resource.
Yeah, I appreciate it. If there's anything that can help anybody do with just looking over their policies or answering any kind of complex questions or even the simple ones or what if scenarios, I'm game. That's my cup of tea.
All right. So give Corey a call if you need any help. Anyway, talk to you later.